Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Hare Krishna. Thank you for this opportunity and honor, which I do not deserve. And today we're going to start with Canto 2, Chapter 9, Verse 5, in Srimad Bhagavatam 295. It's not easy with the Sanskrit, so bear with me here. Sahadidevo Jagatam Paro Guru.
Sahadidevo Jagatam Paro Guru.
Svadhisnyam Astaya Sishriksayak Sata.
Svadhisnyam Astaya Sishriksayak Yayiksara.
Tam Nadya Gachat Visham Atra Samadam.
Tam Nadya Gachat Visham Atra Samadam.
Prapancha Nirmana Vidir Yaya Bhavet.
Prapancha Nirmana Vidir Yaya Bhavet.
Sahadidevo Jagatam Paro Guru.
Sahadidevo Jagatam Paro Guru.
Svadhisnyam Astaya Sishriksayak Shata.
Svadhisnyam Astaya Sishriksayak Shata.
Tam Nadya Gachat Drishyam Atra Samadam.
Tam Nadya Gachat Visham Atra Samadam.
Prapancha Nirmana Vidir Yaya Bhavet.
Prapancha Nirmana Vidir Yaya Bhavet. Sahadidevo Jagatam Paro Guru.
Sahadidevo Jagatam Paro Guru.
Svadhisnyam Astaya Sishriksayak Shata. Tam Nadya Gachat Visham Atra Samadam. Prapancha Nirmana Vidir Yaya Bhavet. Svadhidevo Jagatam Guru.
Swadhishyam Astaya Sishriksayak Shata.
Svadhisnyam Astaya Sishriksayak Shata.
Tam Nadya Gachat Visham Atra Samadam.
Tam Nadya Gachat Visham Atra Samadam. Prapancha Nirmana Vidir Yaya Bhavet. Sahadidevo Jagatam Paro Guru. Svadhisnyam Astaya Sishriksayak Yayiksara. Tam Nadya Gachat Visham Atra Samadam. Prapancha Nirmana Vidir Yaya Bhavet.
Sahadidevo Jagatam Paro Guru.
Sahadidevo Jagatam Paro Guru.
Swadhishyam Astaya Sishriksayak
Svadhishyam Astaya Sishriksayak Shata. Tam Nadya Gachat Visham Atra Samadam. Prapancha Nirmana Vidir Yaya Bhavet.
Sahadidevo Jagatam Paro Guru.
Sahadidevo Jagatam Paro Guru.
Swadhishyam Astaya Sishriksayak Shata.
Svadhishyam Astaya Sishriksayak Shata.
Mataji's? Okay. Saha, he, Adi Deva, the first demigod, Jagatam, of the universe, Para, supreme, Guru, spiritual master, Svadhisnyam, his lotus seat, Astaya, to find the source of it, Sisrikshaya, for the matter of creating the universal affairs. Aikshata, began to think. In that matter, na, could not. Adyagachat, understand. Yisham, the direction. Atra, therein. Samatam, just the proper way. Prapancha, material. Nirmana, construction. Vidhi, process. Yaya, as much as. Bhavet, should be. Translation by Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you. Lord Brahma, the first spiritual master, supreme in the universe, could not trace out the source of his lotus seed. And while thinking of creating the material world, he could not understand the proper direction for such creative work, nor could he find out the process for such creation. Please repeat after me. Lord Brahma, the first spiritual master, supreme in the universe, could not trace out the source of his lotus seed. And while thinking of creating the material world, he could not understand the proper direction for such creative work. Nor could he find out the process for such creation. Very cool verse. Okay, here's the purport by Srila Prabhupada. This verse is the prelude for explaining the transcendental nature of the form and the abode of the Lord. In the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, it has already been said that the Supreme Absolute Truth exists in his abode, in his own abode, without any touch of the deluding energy. Therefore, the kingdom of God is not a myth, but factually a different and transcendental sphere of planets known as the Vaikunthas. This will also be explained in this chapter. Such knowledge of the spiritual sky far above this material sky and its paraphernalia can be known only by dint of devotional service or Bhakti Yoga. The power of creation by Lord Brahma was also achieved by Bhakti Yoga. Brahmaji was bewildered in the matter of creation, and he could not even trace out the source of his own existence. But all this knowledge was fully achieved by him through the medium of Bhakti Yoga. By Bhakti Yoga, one can know the Lord, and by knowing the Lord as the Supreme, one is able to know everything else. One who knows the Supreme knows everything else. That is the version of all Vedas. Even the first spiritual master of the universe was enlightened by the grace of the Lord. So who else can attain perfect knowledge of everything without the mercy of the Lord? If anyone desires to seek perfect knowledge of everything, he must seek the mercy of the Lord, and there is no other means. To seek knowledge on the strength of one's personal attempt is a sheer waste of time. Hare Krishna. So I really like this verse. I think you can go really deep into the verse itself. And, basically what I'd like to talk about today is what you could call psychoanalysis. I think psychoanalysis. So, because Lord Brahma is a person, and we are persons, we can try to understand what's happening with Lord Brahma here as a person. We can try to relate to him as best we can. Now, obviously, Lord Brahma is top-level demigod who's, far more important and powerful and knowledgeable and blissful and so on than we are. But persons are persons. And Lord Krishna is also a person. And I think this may sound like maybe speculation what I'm getting into, but it's not. It's psychology. So as long as we accept the truth of this verse, if we accept that Bhagavatam is true, and then from that point on, try to understand it in the best way we can for ourselves, then we can benefit and have a better chance of realizing these great and deep truths. So for me, a lot of that comes down to psychology. So, question. Why or how was Lord Brahma, the creator of the universe, how is it that someone is tasked to create the universe, but he's not given instruction how to do that? So, why is this happening? How is this happening? Is this a twisted joke? Is this a transcendental joke? So I have my own answer to that, but I'm curious what anyone else thinks. Why is it that, and in the beginning it's just Lord Krishna and Lord Brahma, right? But Lord Brahma is left all alone and he has to fend for himself to create this material reality. And why is that? Anyone?
Well, because my speculation would be that because you need to perform tapas first in order to understand that. So therefore, the Lord said,
Yes. Yes, so Shivananda said this is because Lord Brahma must first do tapas, must first do some penance or sacrifice in order to proceed after that.
Does he know that he's supposed to create? How does he know he's supposed to create?
Nice, I like that. Even deeper. Yes. Maybe he doesn't know at first what his role is. Just like for myself, and I know many of us, I didn't know, I still don't know who I am fully. I don't know if I ever will. But I didn't have even a reasonable idea of who I was until I was in my 20s, late 20s maybe. And that's, ideally a quarter of a lifetime. So that could be one reason. Maybe Brahma is entrusted with creating the universe, but in order for that creation to be truly impactful or meaningful, he has to first come from a place of, I don't want to say ignorance, but, I guess it's basically ignorance, and then through tapas and sacrifice and study, come to understand voluntarily who he is and what he's here to do. And so then when he does create, it has more meaning. And so this is, a perfect analogy for our own lives. We have to understand with a high degree of free will, what is devotional service, what is Krishna, who is Krishna. And when we have this kind of knowledge, which comes from sacrifice, tapas, and other difficulties, then when we do engage in whether it's creation or bhakti yoga or anything, there's a real gravity to it. there's a real weight to it. I also like to think about why does basically Krishna include this verse in the Bhagavatam? Because he didn't have to. He could have just said, the analogy of the corresponding text I'm reminded of is the Genesis in the Old Testament, where it just says, first there was light, and then there was, man and woman. It just goes bam, 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 bam. This is the creation, and then next. Here's the next thing. But here we're getting into, this is a very subtle and gradual demonstration and explanation of what's happening in the beginning of time.
And mentioned in the verse previous to this also, that the Lord was pleased with the unmotivated chaplain.
Right, I believe in the last verse from yesterday was non-deceptive was the word, yeah. That's a really powerful word. And so yesterday we talked about how there's many, practices of austerity, but if they're not in Bhakti Yoga, ultimately in the end there's some sort of deception and some sort of fall down and some sort of problem. And so by doing some pure devotion, Lord Krishna was pleased by Lord Brahma and was able to give him what he needed to do to create the universe. Another thing I find interesting here, it says, Lord Brahma could not trace out the source of his lotus seed. I think this is also significant. So why is it so to me this indicates not only did he not know how to create the universe, he didn't know where he was. So, one of the main lessons of all these Vedic scriptures is humility. So, this point about how he doesn't know how to create the universe, he doesn't know the process for it, he doesn't even know where he's sitting down. He doesn't know where he is. This is, once again, how do we bring it to our own psychology, to our own lives? It's humility. We have to be humble with who we are and where we are. Otherwise, when we do proceed, I think this is exactly what the previous verse 4 was referring to, with deceptive work. If we think we're the master, but we're not, and then we proceed with some sort of austerity, or I'm going to start a new job, or whatever it is, it may ultimately, in the end, come to bite us in a place we don't like to be bitten. So that's the main lesson from me there, is humility. If you can't trace your own seed, how can you do anything? If you don't know where you are or who you are or what you're meant to do, how can you do anything? And how do you get out of that slump? Well, once again, the main lesson in these scriptures, especially the Bhagavatam, is Bhakti Yoga. And I think Krishna plays jokes on us. He we can see him as our father, right? And much like with little children who, they're stumbling around, they don't know what to do. And the father knows, and the mother too, that eventually they'll stop stumbling and they'll learn what they need to do. But before that happens, sometimes mom and dad like to play tricks. Like to say, oh, maybe you should try it this way, knowing that, he's just going to keep stumbling for a little while. But we have to keep stumbling until we get to this point of rock bottom, which is where genuine humility comes. And from genuine humility, you also get sincerity and a real eagerness to improve your situation. And it seems like this is exactly what happened with Lord Brahma, who is, once again, the, a top-level demigod, who I personally cannot fathom what that even means. But at the same time, he's a person. And as a person, I can relate to this. I can relate to being so confused and humiliated and in ignorance that I don't know even the basic things of who I am and what I'm supposed to do. And the real trap there is trying to do it yourself. That's where we fail. So when we find ourselves in these places of ignorance and suffering and whatever else, that's the golden opportunity to reach out to Krishna. And it's quite a gift because as our situation gets worse, the natural tendency for humility and sincerity and so on is easier. It's actually easier. So, of course, the problem is once you do surrender, then you got to get back to tapas and do some sacrifices and penances, and you have to wait years or lifetimes for the fruit of your work to finally come into play. What else here?
I have one point.
Yes, please.
First, Lord Brahma, he didn't do that. First, he used his mind and senses to figure out where he was coming from. He dove in the water, and he was going down the stem of the lotus flower to find out the origin. Then he was defeated. He could not reach the source. He came back, and the Acharya, they say this is like the scientific process. People try to figure out by themselves in the mind and senses, answering the big questions. And when somebody is more intelligent, he relies on the Supreme. So first he failed with his mind and senses. Then he heard the voice step up. Because he was by destiny, he was put there due to his past desire. He was put there to create. That was his nature. He had a vague premonition that what he was supposed to do. Like we do ourselves sometimes. We find ourselves somewhere. Why am I here? But we're put there by the super soul Krishna in our heart. He knows what we want. And he's going to activate the activities that we're meant to perform. So Brahma was already there, ready to create. And he had that intuition, but then he heard the clue. You have to meditate, you have to please Krishna, and then Krishna revealed. Because Lord Brahma received impression to his heart how to create. Because in the spiritual world, everything is there already, and there's like a blueprint transported to Brahma's heart, how to plan, how to make the universe. He received it from the super soul. But the yogis, they do not experiment with their senses, they rather meditate. They find a problem, they deeply meditate on it, and the solution arises through their meditation. That's also they get mystic powers by putting themselves in samadhi and meditating on different aspects of the Supreme, and they derive their mystic power that way. So that's what I heard from different people.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu. That reminded me of another thing besides psychology that I really am interested in, I've practiced a lot, which is anthropology, or basically culture. So the main differences in culture, there's only one main difference that I see after all my experience in different countries and meeting different people, when I look at the landscape of human culture, I see just two things. I see East and West, and you could also see modern versus traditional. And for us Westerners, this is especially difficult because, and not only Westerners, but Americans, because American history and American culture is like the most Western culture ever, where we're like conditioned from a young age for decades and a few centuries to do everything ourselves. It's all about being the rugged individual, the self-sufficient, independent individual, and pick you up by your bootstraps, that whole bob or that whole culture, you might say, which is good for a certain thing, mostly for material life. But for spiritual life, this just utterly destroys us. This makes everything so difficult. I guess I'll share a personal story relating to that. So, I've been teaching for 7 years, and I'm happy to teach. It's clearly what I'm meant to do. There's different ways to do it. You can teach this age or that age, this subject or that subject. But teaching in general is my thing, and it took me a long time to realize that. And for the beginning of most of my life, I was using my senses and my mind, experimenting, playing out different things. And what worked was, in the end, it was surrender. I had a substitute teaching job for a little while, and it didn't work, and then I was at a crossroads. I knew I liked teaching, but all of the hassle of getting a license and what if I get the wrong job and that doesn't work? I was stuck in that mental place for a while. And eventually, Krishna showed me this one website. I have no idea how it came up as I was searching, but it said, teach in Thailand. Coconuts, mangoes, woo, elephants. Thailand is great. 99% job placement guarantee. And I didn't know anything about Thailand. I knew, it was a Buddhist country, like coconuts, mangoes, that sort of thing. That's all I knew. But I got a strong signal from Krishna that would be, that I had nothing to lose. And two, I was ready to surrender. And at that moment, I was given the thing to surrender to, and ultimately it worked. And from Thailand, I went to Vietnam and China and all over the place, and things just keep getting. Things kept getting better and better. But the important thing, the moral of the story here is, once I surrendered, from that point on, it was just more surrender. So when I was in Thailand, I didn't use my mind to try and figure out, what do I do next? And what's this? This job is, there's problems here. I need to go somewhere else. What do I do? I didn't do any of that. I just waited and prayed, and eventually the same thing happened again. In Vietnam, just came into my consciousness. It was right next to Thailand. So I was offered a job, basically, and I said, I don't know anything about Vietnam. I know even less about Vietnam than Thailand, but it seems right, and I'm just going to jump on it. And this is how a lot of people, this is more in tune with the spiritual life, as opposed to how we're conditioned to, which is serious planning of every single step. And the problem when you plan things is you get expectations. And when you get expectations and you don't meet your expectations, then you suffer. So, one of the many lessons I've learned is just stop having expectations, which is exactly what karma yoga is all about, right? We just do our work and we don't have the right to the fruits of the work. So one way you can mitigate that or practice that is by just removing expectations from the equation. And then you don't have to worry about how do I detach myself from the fruit, or what sort of meditation practice do I need to do. If you don't expect anything, you get what you get, and you can just keep on moving. I hope there was a...
Well, the question that comes to my mind, discussing about this is being discussed here in Srimad Bhagavatam, the beginning of the creation of this universe. And do we know that this is what happens in every universe when the creation takes place? The Lord Brahma always particular manifestation of the universe. But I don't know if that's what happens in every manifestation.
Thank you, Prabhu. Another great rhetorical question. I mean, it's a philosophical question. So a lot of what I do when I read Prabhupada books is I ask these questions to myself incessantly, all the time. And I think what I found the way how this works is you put out a question and then you basically forget about it. So you still want the answer, but you have to wait until the answer comes. So this kind of question, which was, is it just in this universe where verse 5 here in this 9th chapter, 2nd canto, is this true in every other universe that Lord Brahma creates? Well, for now we don't know, but if you hold on to that question in the background of your consciousness and keep on thinking about it and studying, eventually you get clues. So, like I said, this verse, there's a lot of, within each phrase here, you can go into it in different ways. And as always, Srila Prabhupada's purport has a very particular tone and direction to it. So Srila Prabhupada is known as the Bhakti Vedanta Swami. And this is exactly what he does in every single purport. I get continually amazed by it. But, sometimes it's repetitive. But basically, devote yourself more to the Lord. That's Bhakti. And Vedanta means by the scriptures, with strict adherence to the scriptures. And so, in my class and in my mind, I'm doing psychology, I'm doing culture, I'm using all these different things, my own experiences, to try and understand this. And that's because I'm not a Bhaktivedanta Swami, but Srila Prabhupada is. And so in the purport, when he doesn't, he's very careful to only refer to other verses, other scriptures. And so I can see right here it says, that is the version of all Vedas. So he can only refer to, can't only, but he's always trying to stay within Vedanta, to stay within the Vedas, which is a very difficult process. Because the Vedas are massive, there's so many thousands and millions of verses, and to stay purely within the scriptures without any conjecture alone is very difficult. And it seems the way to proceed with that is to have the intelligence to know when one verse in one place corresponds to another verse in another place, and eventually you develop like a network of meaning of how everything relates to everything else. And that's basically what I do, but I've chosen more the Italian Renaissance path of like science, religion, art. I just combine all of that into its own network, as opposed to the Vedas, which are complete and exhaustive in themselves. So you don't actually need anything other than the Vedas if you want. It's just really difficult, especially for us modern Western folk. The Vedas are from ancient India. We live in modern America. That's the exact opposite place and time, the exact opposite. So this is difficult, and once again, moral of the story is be humble. Anyone else? Question, comment?
Why do we need to know about the other planets?
The other planets?
No. Why do we need to know Brahma has anything to do with other planets? Like Shivananda said, what happens? What is the necessity?
For me, that is useful because it helps us to understand Lord Brahma better. And when we understand a very prominent demigod and devotee of Krishna, we understand Krishna better as well. So remember, like Krishna is a person, and I mean, but also the whole universe is just part of him too. So, like, there's two paths. There's the direct path where you just, okay, I want to learn more about Krishna Paramama. Hi, there you are. You know, he's right here. You can, there he is. He's right there. He may not answer your prayers right away, but if you want to know him, talk to him, play with him, dance, he's right there. You can go that route. You can go even more direct to Bhagavan. I don't even try to do that. But then there's the indirect path where you study the universe. And you can study the laws of the universe. You can study other personalities in the universe, like Lord Brahma. And the more you understand the universe, the more you understand Krishna as well. Because the universe is Krishna. Not entirely, but you can't actually escape Krishna. You may try, but you cannot. What Maya is illusion. Maya is not a place. It's like a disease of the mind, consciousness, kind of. So, and as soon as we clean this sort of illusion, this sort of virus, whatever you want to call it, as soon as we purify it, then we can see Krishna and ourselves, Jiva, Atma, clearly. And Atma and Paramatma are here always. You don't have to fabricate something to see yourself, to see Krishna. He's here the whole time. You need to purify yourself to see what's already been here and underneath and more subtle than everything else. It's been here the whole time. Hope that answers your question.
But if you start thinking too much, it gets complicated.
Yes.
So the simplest thing, Bhakti Yoga, this is Kali Yoga. So Bhakti Yoga and Gyanu Yoga. There are two things. So Bhakti Yoga is the most simplest way to surrender. People who go towards Bhakti Yoga, they have to do real hard work. They study and study and study and study. And I give you one example. Like Moses has 12 disciples. Out of 12 disciples, 11 were very simple. Jesus had 12 disciples. Okay. So when out of 12 disciples, 11 were whatever Jesus says is okay. But one disciple said he wanted to research everything. So 11 said, the earth is round. Okay, earth is round. But one of them, I had to find out. Wow. I had to find out. So he keeps searching. There's no end to it. No end to it. And that is the most difficult path to follow.
Gyanu.
Yeah. You have to go so deep that many times you get lost. So that's what in Kali Yuga, it is created by Vedas that Bhakti Yoga is the most simplest way to reach Krishna. Very simple way. Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. You don't have to read, go deep into it. Just Hare Ram, that's it.
Yes, that's true. Real quick. Now, Bhakti Yoga is simple, but it can also get complicated itself as well. Because Bhakti Yoga has many different ways to practice. You can chant, you can listen, you can, there's so many more.
But these are simple ways.
Yeah.
They're very simple ways. Shravanam, speaking, everything, very simple ways. It doesn't need any technique. But the Gyanu Yoga, you have to study everything, Purana, Upanishad, Vedas, whatnot. Oh, is vast. Is vast. Only few people can reach to the depth of the Gyanu. Only few. But for common public, common person, Bhakti Yoga is the most simplest way to reach Krishna.
That's right. And that's
And
why
it says clearly in Bhagavatam, Bhakti Yoga is most simplest way. You don't need education, high education, master's, PhD, nothing. Very simple. Very simple.
Shama?
Well, I wanted to ask you, why do you think that Sukadeva Goswami, there's a relationship between questions that were put forth by Rishi? Why is Sukadeva Goswami talking about where we're on this evolution of Brahma? Rishi didn't ask anything about Brahma. Why do you think this?
Very good question.
I'm asking him.
So remember, the very first thing I said today was something like, thank you for this honor and pleasure which I don't deserve, and one reason I don't deserve to be teaching this class, and I'm not like overly humble or something. I haven't read the Bhagavatam yet, and so normally I would feel really uncomfortable teaching something that I don't know. However, we're just doing one verse at a time. But anyway, when I say I haven't read the Bhagavatam and it bothers me, it's what you're talking about, Gyanu, where you say, like, there's the philosophy here, there's the theology of like, here's how the universe works, there's all these sorts of technical things, but then there's also the narrative, where you have Sukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj, and I get so confused about where we are in the narrative, and so my personal taste is the philosophy and the technical stuff, so that's what I focus on, get interested in. Now, to answer your question, why are we talking about Lord Brahma and creation when Parikshit Maharaj, his main question, he's on his deathbed, right? And his main concern is going to the hereafter, as the Muslims call it, going to the next life, into a better place, into being liberated, and so on, right? So, an answer I gave previously is that, I think I gave this to Jagdish, is that when you understand the universe, you understand Krishna. And sometimes, it reminds me of the Bhagavad Gita, like, in chapter 2 and chapter 3, Krishna tells Arjuna very explicitly, like, you're a warrior, you're here to fight, so just fight. Like, but Arjuna cannot accept it. And it's not really for Arjuna and myself, and I think many other people, it's not always an intelligence thing. It's more where our heart is and where our karma and all this stuff is, of what we're able to accept, what we're able to realize. And so for Arjuna, he had to hear the science of the soul and reincarnation, Rajavidya. He had to hear all of this stuff to kind of warm up his heart to accept and to realize the truth. And once he was able to accept and realize that, then he could act. And so for Parikshit Maharaj, he's a great soul, and he needs this. He needs to know about all of this, because he has like a hunger for this that many do not have. And Sukadeva Goswami is, this whole thing was arranged so that, just like with Bhagavad Gita, the whole battlefield was all put together. It's all Krishna's plan, so that these conversations can happen, so that very great souls, based on their needs and how they're suffering, which is hard to comprehend a lot of times, how for them to accept the truth. And so, Jagadish mentioned, let's keep it simple, right? So, this is what I practice a lot, especially after living in China for a while. They are the masters of keeping it simple. No one does it like the Chinese. This is rice, this is tea, I'm happy. That's it. There's nothing else really. Like, I have my family, I have my work, I'm happy. That's simple, and I'm happy. And so with this, we can say, oh, Krishna's God, and he loves me, takes care of me, so that's it. Now, when it's too simple, then it becomes a little impersonal. So you could say there's a golden mean here of like, if we get too detailed and too personal, it's too difficult, it requires too much tapas, and we burn ourselves out. But also if we get too simple with it, oh, Krishna's God and God takes care of me, that's it, then it's like Sahaja, kind of lazy problem there.
So the Prabhupada, as far as simple goes, is yes, the Krishna consciousness is very easy and it's very simple, but its applications. It's like Krishna says, Namana Bhagavad Bhakto, Bhajajamana, always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, observations to be, and surely they will come to me. So always think of Krishna. That's very simple, but to always think of Krishna, application, because we're dealing with our minds. And in the conditioned state, the mind is the worst enemy. So the mind won't allow us. The application is very hard, because we're conditioned. We have our minds there in a way.
Thank you. Yes, that another thing that reminds me of the East and West differences. So in the East, it's not only Bhakti Yoga, it's also Kung Fu and the martial arts in general, and like Taoism, like all these Eastern practices, they all share the common understanding that these, I'll call them transcendental activities, are really simple and really difficult. In the West, we have this idea that, to do something well, you need to have a sophisticated understanding. You need to know all these technical terms, and it's very complicated. And sometimes those who are more complicated, we say, oh, wow, they're smart, But when it comes to the deeper, more meaningful, more difficult practices like yoga, meditation, martial arts, there's probably more that I'm missing. They're very simple. You can teach any 5-year-old child the fundamentals of what we're talking about here, and the practice is what takes years and lifetimes. Shani?
I just want to echo that statement. Simple from simple. In the Nectar instruction booklet, approximately in the purport, he said devotional service is not a sentimental activity. It was generally people think that the common misunderstanding is that bhakti is for people who are not intelligent, they're not philosophically inclined. It's for those who are simple. But actually, behind the theology, behind bhakti, is such a deep philosophy and theology that is mind-boggling. That Jiva Goswami's Samgardas, they're the greatest philosophical works ever. And people, Prabhupada said, people will one day realize that he was the greatest philosopher. So behind, like my husband would say, okay, the process is simple, but application is difficult because we're dealing with our mind. Well, behind the mind, then we can go into what is the mind. Then we get into the elements, there's a deep philosophy and theology behind everything we do. Someone could say, oh, all you have to do is chant Hare Krishna. It's true. If you have that simple faith, that's all you need. But if you want to be convinced, why should you chant Hare Krishna? What's the power of the holy name? What's the importance of Krishna's name? How is it powerful? How can it transform the world? There's a philosophy behind it. Just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Atmaram verse, he explained it in 64 or 65 different ways. So there is a deep philosophy behind it. For those who want to and have a need to understand, yes. Ultimately, Krishna says, Bahunama Janmanama, the Gyanu Vam. Those who are being Gyanu, who have been following this Gyanu over millions and billions of lifetimes, since time immemorial, Gyanu Mam, after all this knowledge, they come to me. So either we can go through all that process and become a Gyanu for millions and billions of life, and then come to the understanding, yes, Krishna is the supreme, or if we have a simple heart, and we have the mercy of the Lord, we realize that Krishna is God, He's beautiful, His pastimes are beautiful, His activities are beautiful, His power is beautiful, His devotees are wonderful. If we have that simple faith, that can be enough. But if it's not enough to apply and practice, then that's why we have the philosophy. And I don't know if I want to make a comment, but I was thinking, you were asking, well, why is Srimad Bhagavatam speaking about Lord Brahma, who's creation knowledge, really ask that question. Of course, we can look back at the chapters and look at the questions he's asking. But later on in the 10th chapter, which is titled Bhagavatam, is the answer to all questions. But one of the shlokas is the 10 topics of the Bhagavatam. So a Mahapurana has 10 topics, and the first topic of any Purana, or to speak of a Mahapurana, is Sarga. The first topic is creation. Sarga, Visarga.
Visarga is the secondary creation.
Yeah, so Sarga is the first creation, and Visarga. So these are 2 topics. And out of the 10, these are two topics. And another reason I was thinking maybe it's speculation. Also, is, Parikshit Maharaj is on his deathbed. And if you see the progression of the Bhagavatam, you see it goes from creation. And the last topic, or what happens in the 12th canto, is Nirodha, which is annihilation. So what's the message? What's the overall message you're getting? Everything is created, it stays for some time, and maintenance is also one of the topics. Nourishing, how something sticky, how something is situated, where it's situated, how it's maintained. And then it gets annihilated. Well, the same thing, creation and again in the 12th canto, annihilation. This is a process for not only the entire creation of the universe, but also for the individual. Not for the soul, but for the body. So another message is like, yeah, see, everything's created, everything's destroyed, it stays for some time. The universe gets destroyed, our body gets destroyed. So, I'm just speculating, but there's so many layers and ways of looking at things. And we're mentioning in the Sanskrit term for that samasti and blessing. Samasti is when we try to understand. If someone is really inquisitive, and Prabhupada says this in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, when he's talking about Krishna saying, well, I will not plant my energy, and I nourish the vegetables with this moon. So many, he says, this is, herein lies the beginning of Krishna consciousness, because if one can appreciate things outside of himself, in the outer world, and someone is seeking, then they can see, wow, there's something behind this. So that's called samasti. So looking at the outer world and trying to understand and see God. And when we look inside, that's macro and then micro. When we look inside, that's called vyasti. I'm like this, so we study our own self. So those are the 2 approaches which you were talking about, and they're bona fide approaches. Samasti and vyasti. But beyond all that, which is the main point, Prabhupada makes 2 main points in the purport. One was from what the purport that I thought 2 main points. One was that there is another reality. It's factual. And he said this verse is a prelude to that reality of transcendental form and reality. So there is a reality, it's beyond, it's transcendental. And the second point that he stresses in the rest of the purport is that how do you understand that reality? There's a process, and the process is Bhakti. That's the process. And how do you even get to that process? Through the mercy of the Lord. So we cannot understand. And the mercy of the Lord is the Vedas. That's the mercy. The scriptures that he gives is a form of mercy. So it's not like oh, we're just intellectuals or just trying to understand. No, the Vedas give us this knowledge. This is Krishna's mercy to help us understand. And there's no end to it. So in Bhakti Yoga, it's not like, oh, we just have to just only chant and do the rituals. It's not just about the ritual. It's seeing the spirit behind the rituals, and for that, we have so many rituals, which we do need to understand so we can be fixed. So in the class.
Quick little story I'll share about prasadam, because it's almost that time, relating to, well, look, in general, for me, I just try to be like a child. When it comes to Bhakti Yoga, I try to just be my 5-year-old self, because in that phase of development, there's innocence, there's joy, and there's honesty. At a high level, children have this at that age. They have it so well. And if you give them something they do, they want to give them some karatas or something, if they want to do it, they'll do it. And they'll do it so purely and nicely. And I was really lucky that I was able to do this by chance when I first offered boga as prashad. The first time I ever did this, I was in a really small little Airbnb apartment in Bangkok, Thailand. I had just come back from Mayapur. I was a devotee for like 4 years without any devotee association, without so many things. I just had the Bhagavad Gita and I had my Yasaki Kirtan I'd listened to. That's it. That's all I had, but it was enough to keep me going, and that like fire, whatever, was killing for a long time. And then finally I got to Mayapur and I was like, oh my God, this is what devotees are doing, I have to do this too. It was like a crash course very soon. And then, so that was just like 1 month, and then I'm back to my normal life in Thailand, and I'm like, what do? I mean, if I have to eat, I have to offer it, and like, what do I do? And so, I would wander from my apartment to like the store there, and I was like, oh, what's the good thing to offer here? We're like, where's the freshest stuff? And I go, oh, mangoes are good, there's good mangoes here, and rice, that's good too, right? And what I come up with is this made-up dish that no one's ever done before. It's like rice with mangoes on top, in milk with spinach too. It makes no sense. But I was just thinking of Krishna the whole time that I was in the store and thinking, well, spinach, that's fresh, that's sattvic, yeah, that's good. He'll like it, And like as a meal in the material platform, it made no sense. But because I was thinking of Krishna the whole time in a very innocent way, and when I did offer it, I had one little picture of Prabhupada, maybe that's it, and not even an altar or anything. I mean, I had one little desk in this tiny little space, but I made the little section as best as I could. I don't even know if I said Namo Vishnu Padaya. I don't even know what prayers I said, but I just did it from the heart. And I remember those 2 weeks in that apartment, some of the best prasadam I've ever had. I mean, tasty, even though it makes no sense. Spinach and rice and milk and mango. It's like, what is this? But because there was some purity to it, and for me, like the bhav of purity I go for is like childishness. That's the most immediate thing that I can think of, which I'm attracted to. And so I try to emulate that as much as I can. And so I think with that we can honor some prasadam. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Guru Nitai ki. Srila Prabhupada ki.